weeks for Sunday school. And we see that's what he wanted. Look at me, look at me, look at what I've done. I've been in the fields. You know, he might have took some dirt from the fields and put it all over his face, make him look like he'd really been working. Yeah. And come up there. You see, I don't know. The man did not care about the Father. He did what he did so he could get what he could get out of it. You see, you don't have to leave the Father's house and go to the far country. The far country can come to you. You see, we see that he even saw his service to his father's slavery, I believe. See, he didn't serve out of love. He served out of to help himself. And that's the sad thing. Sometimes today, that same thing happens. You see, somebody's worried this morning about whatever it is about their status in churches. You know, if somebody gets saved, well, good gracious, going to change my status. That happens in churches today. You see, somebody's going to change my status in churches. Well, you know, your status ain't your status is with God. That you should be doing whatever it is for God. You see, and people have personal agendas, and you got to stroke people and give them accolades and pat them on the back and this, that, and the other. That's true. You see, thing is that we need to look and see the example of the youngest son who comes home to the father and says, Father, I've sinned against you. You see? Amen?
Amen.
You see? He had a problem with his mentality. And of course, that's what a devil operates. That's how he brings that far country to you, through your mental state. You see? Especially when we get tired. You see, sometimes I get so tired. I don't know about y'all. I mean, just like the brother said the other day, because I thought he was speaking right to me. In fact, I told him that. I said, what did you do? He was just speaking to me the other night. But sometimes I've said to Brock, boy, I'm going to take you and I'm going to beat you limb to limb. Because he can get us frustrated, you see. You know. Now sometimes he might need it. But sometimes I might need it too. Yeah. See, my father might need to get me limb to limb. And see, when I come into the house of God, I don't want the far country to come in here and rob me from a conviction to get close to the Father. Right. Amen. Just like I tell my boy, I'm going to beat you limb to limb. I mean, I say it just like that too. I feel like the devil's just coming in. I don't know if it's the devil or God, but it's one of them. But see, the thing is I want God to convict me just like that too. If I'm out in the will of God, I want God to tell me. But I don't want to come into the house of God, hear the man of God preach from a King James Bible, and be robbed of a blessing because the devil brings a far country, because I allow the devil to bring the far country right here. And I don't go out with that blessing when I go out at whatever time we leave. You see? You don't have to leave the Father's house to go to the far country. You can have the far country come to you. See, he hasn't even talked to the boy or to the father. You see? We don't know what the problem is about what happened before that. Well, I can tell you that he was jealous. He was jealous of his younger son. I mean, he says, thy son. He doesn't say my brother. Do you notice that? He says, thy son with a little s. Thy son. Well, isn't he a son? Why did he say my brother? Because that's his relationship with the father's younger son, that they're brothers. That's right. See, that means he's jealous, I think. He had envy in his heart against his younger son. Younger brother. You see? We notice that. He was far away from the father, as was the other son. The only difference was the other son was physically away from the father. He was mentally away from the father. And at least one thing for sure, when the youngest son was down there wandering around with the pigs, you see, at least he came to himself and went home, went back into the father's house, you see. All he wanted to do was live it up, but he wanted to do it just like his younger brother did, if it be honest. And he can't, and he gets mad because he can't live it up like his younger brother did. And then when his younger brother comes home after doing what his older brother really wants to do, he gets mad because the father throws a party for his brother. You see? It's a heart problem. It's kind of like the Pharisees we've been talking about. You don't have to leave the father's house to go into the far country, because it'll come to you. You see? It doesn't. See, you don't have to be a drunk to be out of God's will. You don't have to commit adultery. You don't have to do anything else to be out of God's will. We all can sit in Sunday school classes of churches today, and I'm including myself in this, and preach or teach or do anything for God, and you can still be out of God's will, and God can still rob you of a blessing because we allow the far country to come into us. See, it's kind of like we reel it in with a rod and reel. And it's got the devil on the other end of it. See, that's what we're catching. We're catching the devil. You see. We look here, we see the problem with his methods. It also was of disrespect, we mentioned a couple of weeks ago, for an older man to run to the son. That was uncouth, so to speak. For an older man to run during these times biblically, we would call, the snooty people might say, well, that's uncouth. Look at him run. Well, see, you know. But see, notice that we see that. We looked at that last week about that. But notice that in this situation, when we look at this, it was considered disrespect for a young man to argue with his father. Just like it was considered uncouth or disrespect for the father to run to the son. But the father doesn't care what people think. Just like Jesus don't care what people think. And he never sinned. You see, this is what that's a picture of. You see, we can look here and we can see this, and we can see that he brought disgrace upon his father because he did it in the public. He attacked and criticized and he blamed, and we know his heart wasn't right, and his actions is merely a picture of his heart. You see, that's the way that works there. You see, how many times have we watched people attack people, criticize people, and blame people? And it's just like I tell my kids all the time, and I don't know why it is, and this is probably, you know, the flesh. This is a real world situation, a real world, maybe you can relate to, maybe you can help me with it. But I tell my kids, and I know they're 4 and 5, but I tell them, don't embarrass me. Now maybe that's the wrong thing to say, and I know they're kids, and I understand. But now, there's something, being a kid and doing something a typical 4 and 5-year-old would do, than to go in there and tearing up the aisles of Walmart. Now that's a difference. Yeah. Now, yes, it can be 4 and 5 and do things that are 4 and 5. Do you understand what I'm saying? You see? But it's when they go in there and start tearing things down the aisle. You know, you've seen people like that, and the parents just do like this.
Oh, yeah. A lot of that.
Just tearing down everything. That's right. Y'all not do that, you hear? No, they don't hear it. They're tearing down the aisles. Moving right on. Brother Duncan probably sees that at Sam's sometime. Folks just tear down the aisle. You got to go down and pick the men up. Anyway, we won't go there, right? We see the petition heard from the father. See, it was a petition of pleading. The father went out and entreated the boy to come in. You see, the word entreat means to come alongside of another, to offer aid and comfort, to beg, to console, to comfort, to encourage, is what that means. In other words, it's like John 16:13 says, it calls him the comforter. That's what he was doing. See, he was trying to comfort his eldest son. You see, the father loved him, and notice the son won't even call him father. He calls him, but the father calls him son. You see, this father went to the boy in the right spirit, but he was rejected. That's what happens sometimes when people come in here. Especially if they're lost and they come to the house of God. They're still allowing that far country to come in with them. And the far country sits right down in the pew with them. And when really, sometimes it blesses me to no end, and I'm saved. And I'm thinking, how can somebody who sits in here and hear that message, but people's hearts can get callous sometimes. And that's that far country that we're speaking of that gets inside of them, they bring in with them. And we see the petition of promise here. The father praised him for his efforts and reminded him that everything was already his. In fact, the father was saying, I value you, and our relationship together more than your work, son. In other words, I believe what he's saying is, son, you could have always come to me and we would have killed a fatted calf. You would have always come to me. Mine is yours. I would have put a ring on your finger. You would have come to me, son. I'd have given you I got a robe I can give you. Yeah. You see? But see, he never done all these things. Why? Because he didn't have a relationship with the Father, I believe. See, he's speaking to his heart, and I believe he's touching on areas that need to be fixed. You see, in the boy's life. And it was a petition of promise. The father praised him for his efforts, and we looked at that and we said, I value you, our relationship, and you could have celebrated any time. And we see that he went to his servant first to inquire. It speaks of that